You guys keeping up? All right, 2 more labs to go. Nervous system and brain, right? Spine and brain. Neurons. Dendrites have ligand-gated channels. They produce graded potentials. Graded potentials, they're there as a means of bringing a signal into this neuron, right? Once all those graded potentials filter down to the axon hillock here, we see voltage-gated channels which can only open up by way of positives allowed in by the dendrite tree. And so down here, once we open up that first patch of voltage-gated channels at the axon hillock, which is right here, that's the decision-making site of the cell, then the rest of the voltage-gated channels that persist down the axon, they will automatically open up and keep that signal going as long as you're still built right, as long as you don't have multiple sclerosis or ALS are the most common interferences with that. But that's your general neuron. Dendrite tree, cell body for all the life stuff, axon hillock to make a decision is the first place in this flow of information you see voltage-gated channels, action potential all the way down to the axon terminal where it's going to spray neurotransmitter to the next cell. Questions here? Okay, keeping that simple. And that brings us to the nerves. And with these nerves, guys, it's just a matter of keeping track of the yellow lines, right? So this is your brachial plexus down here. And that brachial plexus is going to break out into 5 major nerves that we need you to know. The first is the axillary nerve. It's going to come through the muscle. It winds up being the first protrusion off your brachial plexus here. There are 3. The first one, axillary nerve, and all it does is it kind of gives you some sensation and some motor back here in your shoulder. It ends there. And your axial nerve, brachial plexus, axial nerve is going to be that guy. The next nerve to talk about is the last of those 3 cutoffs off the brachial plexus. That's your radial nerve. And again, it dives down into the meat of your arm, and then it shows up on the lateral side here. Radial nerve. That radial nerve will then continue around your elbow and down the radius side of your arm. That's where the term radial comes from. And so radius here. You need to be able to identify it there, there, and there. Any one of those places is fair game to ask the question. Next is your musculocutaneous nerve. There are 3 cutouts, or 3 little things, tabs, that come off this main body of your brachial plexus. First one, axillary. Last one is radial. The middle one is the musculocutaneous. Musculocutaneous, again, basically just comes out and dives up. On our models, we have no other place to show you the musculocutaneous. So in most cases, guess what nerve you're not going to be asked about because we don't have the ability to ask about it. Okay, so there you go. Strategy counts, yeah? All right. That's your brachial plexus. Now we get into the ulnar nerve, closest to the pinky side. That's it. It's over your ulna. We've got your radial nerve up top, and then we've got your median nerve in the middle. That median nerve can also be seen here on our torso model. I am once in a while evil enough to ask here what that nerve is. As we get down into the legs, and I don't have these nerves really to show you, I don't think, or maybe I do. No, these guys still have their muscles on them. All right, so what we've got here, your sacral plexus. Sacral plexus is the largest plexus you've got. A plexus is simply an ability to get the same information in the same spot over multiple roots. That way, if one of those roots gets blocked or injured, I can still move my body, right? So we've got the brachial plexus on top. We've got a cervical plexus, we've got a lumbar plexus, and we've got a sacral plexus. Your sacral plexus, that one's going to be responsible for giving you your sciatic nerve. Your femoral nerve that you see on the other side here, that hooks up with your lumbar plexus. And that lumbar plexus basically comes in and gives you that line. That femoral nerve from your lumbar plexus, a little bit superior to the sacral plexus you can see here, that's going to split. It's going to continue to be the femoral nerve here, but it's also going to give you the saphenous nerve, which curves down and around through your vastus and rectus femoris. On the back side of this leg, that's that same sciatic nerve. So we get this started with the sacral plexus. It comes down the leg, and then it runs down the back of your leg. If you've ever known anybody with sciatica, or you have it yourself, it's a fairly common thing because this is the biggest nerve in your body, right? And it comes from the sacral plexus, runs all the way down the back of your leg, and it splits just superior to your knee. Turns into the fibular nerve and the tibial nerve. And that tibial nerve just keeps going straight right down your tibia. That's where the name comes from, yes? That fibular nerve is going to continue to go lateral all the way down deep inside your tissues here. And so we can also ask you this nerve right there, also the fibular nerve. You would know that, or at least surmise it, because it's above the fibula. And so it's a decent guess. And listen, guys, if you are completely at a loss, just try to take a guess. Don't leave it blank. Put the area of the body it's in. Put the bone, the name of the bone that's next to it if you know that. Because in many cases, that's going to be enough. Even though you didn't really know, you just squeak through and at least have credit. All right, so never leave this stuff blank. Understand the naming schema that we've come up with here as a science, and understand that a lot of times you could just kind of wing it and just say where it is in the Latin, and you still got it right, even if you had no idea what the hell you were actually talking about. So no blanks on these things. I can't give you credit for no answer. I can maybe get you half points for a decent guess. All right, so that's that. We've got these models in the labs. I don't have them here to show you, but this here, this is your lumbar plexus coming off the lumbar region of your body, and that femoral nerve that we saw in the previous diagram. This guy over here, this is your sacral plexus coming down, and that big thick nerve coming down there, that's your sciatic nerve that's going to run down the back of your femur. All right, now we get to the brain. What did I say? We would get out of here at about 20 after? I think we might be right. Okay, not bad. Your brain's surrounded by coverings. Those coverings are called mothers. When we talk about those mothers, really, it's a mater, not matter. One T, mater is German. And so the dura mater comes from the same root word where the term durable comes from, tough. Right? That dura mater is a very tough outer shell membrane around your brain and your spinal cord. Just south of that, we've got your spider mother, or the arachnoid mother. It's no name because this mother has actually set up a bunch of support struts that puts this membrane a little bit off the surface of your brain. And that allows cerebrospinal fluid to flow in between this membrane and the actual brain. And then, closest to the brain, we've got the gentle mother, or the pia mater. And the pia mater is a very delicate thing. Its job is to hold onto the blood vessels, make sure they're not getting sheared as they dive into the meat of your brain, right? And basically, it's just gloms right down on the surface of the neurons that make up your brain. So those three mothers are collectively termed your meninges. And so unless you have a series of paperwork and a really good reason why, all of us here have been vaccinated against meningitis. And that's because meningitis is one of the most infectious diseases we got. If somebody with meningitis walks into the other side of the room, we can count on at least 5 people going home with meningitis today. And a good chance of death for all of them, right? And so meningitis is a swelling of those meninges. And it's that risk of severe infection, severe death, which is why we require it for almost everybody who sits in our classroom. Vaccinate. Just vaccinate. Don't be dumb. That was my public service announcement for the week. And if you're offended, please go vaccinate. All right. When you get your brain, we've separated this thing into several lobes. And there are gyri and sulci here. Gyri being the upticks, the crests of these waves, and sulci being the troughs of these waves. And some of these actually bear witness to a border between one area and the next. But when it comes down to your major areas of the brain, your frontal lobe is right up front. This is executive decisioning, planning. This is you getting to school in the morning and figuring out which clothes you're going to wear today. Like decision making. Just at the back of your decision-making center is what we call the motor cortex. That's this red stripe. And it's a headband that goes from ear to ear here, in the frontal lobe still. Every voluntary motion that you've ever had and will ever have starts there. Moves up to the frontal lobe to associate stuff, and then out to your spinal cord so it can send a signal to the right muscles to get that job done. In the back, we've got a parietal lobe, that's the green, and the very first gyrus of your parietal lobe is where every skin sensation you've ever felt is felt. It's another headband, goes from ear to ear, and so when I tickle this part here, there's a very specific area of that place that's actually mapping out and letting me know that my arm's being tickled, right? And so that's your sensory cortex. It's going to feel your skin sensation, send it to your parietal lobe to actually interpret what I'm feeling. I got cold, I got tickly thing, okay, it's my dog. Right? And you'd understand it's a dog because the parietal lobe is there for perception of your senses. Your frontal lobe is there for planning of your motor movements. And that's why the motor is associated with the front and the sensory is associated with the parietal lobe. Those are the association areas that are intact. Occipital lobe, that's where you see. Your temporal lobe is memory and understanding and language. And we've got a couple special areas in there, Broca's area, Wernicke's area, for the production of speech and the understanding of speech, all in the temporal lobe. On your brains in the lab, there's this one sulcus that is, some genius came in a few years ago and labeled with a pen. That's your central sulcus, and it separates your frontal from your parietal lobes. It's the gyri in the front and the back of that central sulcus that are your motor and your sensory cortex. We've also got a lateral sulcus right here, which separates parietal frontal from the temporal lobe underneath. No such clear division between these lobes and the occipital lobe. Down the center of your brain, separating the left and right, you've got a longitudinal fissure. Once we get into the deep inside of this sucker, we've basically covered this. Motor cortex to planning, sensory cortex to perception in the parietal lobe. And so this is a lot of extra stuff we're going to blow through just in the interest of time. Temporal lobe is for your hearing. And there are maps for pitch and rhythm and loudness in there. And it also gives you your recent short-term memory, all in the temporal lobe. With that temporal lobe is your olfactory association area. So like a cranial nerve 1, those olfactory bulbs, they're the ones that actually grab onto your smell sensation at first. They're not the ones telling you what it means. They're just bringing the information in. To understand that that is pizza that I smell, what you need to do is send all that information here by way of your olfactory nerve, there's your olfactory bulb, to your olfactory association area, which sits in your temporal lobe. Your occipital cortex is your primary visual association area, but just like everything else, your eyeball sees it. Its job is not to understand it. It's to bring the information in. Your occipital lobe's job is to bring the information in. Then from there, we bring that to an occipital association area, which is going to recognize the patterns, check them to the patterns we've already seen in our life, and identify what it is that we're actually looking at. So it's a multi-stage process understanding any of our senses, yes? And we have various areas of the brain to do that. In the ventral area of the brain, we've got a cerebellum, different in texture, different in color, different in function. The cerebellum's job is to smooth out your motions. So if you've ever seen a baby go from this to this, that's cerebellar training, is what's going on there. And every single time they grab that bottle or get that thing they wanted, there's a dopamine reward, and that sets up a plan of action for your cerebellum to work. Your medulla is where you get, it's just basically your brainstem. This is your breath rate, your heart rate, your blood pressure. You don't live without your medulla. Right in front of that is your pons. The pons is in large part a superhighway, it's just information coming to and from your brain from the body, but we also have some respiratory rate control in your pons. Also in this basic region, your diencephalon, which is coming right off top of it. We don't show it to you. It's not something that you need to know, but this is the general area of the substantia nigra, which is where Parkinson's is sourced out, and all of its symptomology as those substantia nigra neurons die from that disease. Here we see the pituitary. That pituitary hangs out on our brains. About the same semester the genius marked up the central sulcus, somebody stole all of our pituitaries and we haven't brought them back. So that ball is what's supposed to be hanging off of that hole at the bottom of those brains in the lab, right? That pituitary sits in that sella turcica of the sphenoid bone we talked about at the beginning of the day, yeah? Here is your optic nerve. It looks like an X, because the eyeballs take in the information, sends it to the optic nerve, but the optic nerve, this side actually goes to that side, this side actually goes to that side, it forms an X. If you're into your circadian rhythms or your 24-hour clock, right at the top of that X is a patch of about 1,500 cells that sees the light with you. And if you have trouble falling asleep after you've been watching your phone all night long, it's this area of your brain that's giving you the problem. Because you saw that light coming in from your phone, those cells at the top of that X are not intelligent. They see light and think it's morning, and you're not sleeping anymore because your body is convinced it's morning now. So how do you do this? You turn your phone off 2 hours before, and all your TVs and your things that are shining light in your eyes a couple of hours before you want to go to bed, and you don't get your brain thinking it's morning and sunrise, right? Or you can get the blue light filters for your phones, that night version, that night stuff, that's actually just pulls out a lot of the specific wavelengths of light that are going to cause that action. So if you're having trouble sleeping, try that out, right? Melatonin might work, which is coming from your pineal gland, which we'll get to in a moment. Here are your olfactory bulbs just above the cribriform plate that you're going to smell with. We've got the corpus callosum, which is going to wind up giving you your left-right collection. Here is your pituitary gland. Your pineal gland is right here that gives you melatonin and helps you sleep. Something you're going to want to do quite a bit of, or as much as you possibly can over the next few weeks as you do the grind necessary to get your A. And with that, guys, I have run out of time, which means I've run out of material. Any questions?